David Carter had been driving for nearly 12 hours when the storm hit. The rain was relentless, a sheet of water hammering down on the hood of his old Chevy. The windshield wipers fought in vain to clear his view, smearing streaks of water and mud across the glass. His GPS had lost signal an hour ago, and every mile he drove seemed to pull him deeper into nowhere. When the road curved sharply into a dense wall of trees, he saw it, a wooden sign leaning crookly on its post. The paint was faded, but he could just make out the words carved in flaking white letters, Grayridge. Population 348. David slowed the car, uneasy. The name wasn't familiar. He had traveled plenty through small-town America, and he prided himself on recognizing places, but this one didn't ring a bell. It was as if the town had been tucked away deliberately, hidden from maps and memory. Still, with the storm worsening, his choices were limited. He followed the road into the heart of Grayridge. Main Street was almost empty. A few neon signs flickered, weakly through the rain, their light dim and sickly. An old general store stood on the corner, its wooden sign creaking as the wind tossed it back and forth. A diner with fogged windows glowed faintly from within, the only sign of life. Every building looked decades old, slouched under the weight of neglect. David parked and stepped out, water soaking his jacket instantly. He felt eyes on him. When he turned, he caught glimpses of faces peeking from behind curtains, silhouettes, pressed against windows. But the moment he tried to meet their gaze, they vanished, blinds snapping shut. He hurried into the diner. The bell above the door rang, sharp against the hush. The interior smelled of burnt coffee and fried grease. A single waitress, gray-haired and bent, stood behind the counter. She stared at him for a long time before forcing a weak smile. "Storms. That out there?" she said softly. "Yeah, thought I'd wait it out." "Maybe grab a meal?" Her hands trembled as she poured him coffee. "One night," she whispered, almost too low for him to hear. "No more," David frowned. "Excuse me?" She slid the cup toward him. Her eyes darted to the window, as if afraid. Someone might overhear. It's not easy leaving here. The coffee was bitter. He forced it down, uneasy at the way her words clung to him. The storm raged on outside, hammering against the glass. With nowhere else to go, he asked if there was a motel. The waitress scribbled an address on a napkin, her hands shaking harder now. "Don't go out after midnight," she said firmly. "No matter what you hear." He gave a nervous laugh. "Why? What happens at midnight?" She didn't answer. Motel was a squat one-story building with faded yellow paint and a sagging roof. The clerk barely looked at him, sliding the key across the desk. The room was small, smelled faintly of mold, and had a single narrow window. David tried to shake off the weird vibe. It was just another rundown town, he told himself. Nothing more but at 12:01 a.m., he woke to the sound of a bell. It was deep, resonant, the kind of sound that shook through the bones of a building. He sat upright, heart pounding. The bell tolled again and again, echoing across the rain-drenched night. Curiosity pulled him to the window. He saw them, a procession of townsfolk, silent and solemn, walking toward the church at the center of town. They carried lanterns, their light casting grotesque shadows across their faces. The church itself was ancient, its steeple cracked and leaning, but the bell above it swung violently as if struck by unseen hands. David rubbed his eyes. Was it some midnight mass? A ritual? Why were they all out in the storm? He thought about the waitress's warning, "Don't go out after midnight," but something gnawed at him. He had to know. Throwing on his jacket, he crept outside. The rain had lightened to a mist, but the air was cold and sharp. He followed the line of lanterns, keeping to the shadows. As he drew closer to the church, he noticed something strange. The townsfolk weren't speaking. Not a single word, not a prayer, not a chant. Their silence was heavier than the night. The church doors groaned open, and they filed inside. David slipped in after the last of them, careful to stay hidden in the darkness at the back. The air inside was damp and smelled of mildew and rot. Dozens of candles flickered, their flames bending in unseen drafts. The congregation gathered in a circle around the altar. At the center, the pastor stood a tall, thin man with hollow cheeks and eyes like pits. His voice was low but carried through the church. "The bell is tolled," he said, "and so the blood must flow." David froze. Two men dragged forward a woman. Her wrists were bound, her face pale with terror. She struggled against them, sobbing, pleading, but they forced her to her knees before the altar. The pastor produced a long ceremonial knife, its blade glinting in the candlelight. David wanted to shout, to stop it, but his voice caught in his throat. The knife plunged downward. Her scream split the night, a sound so raw it seemed to shake the rafters. Blood spurted across the altar, dripping into carved channels in the stone. The townsfolk didn't flinch. They bowed their heads as the blood trickled down, feeding into a crack in the floor. The crack widened. David's stomach lurched. Something beneath the church was moving. The ground trembled, and a foul stench rose, a mix of decay and sulfur. From the fissure seeped a black, tar-like substance, bubbling as though alive. The woman's body convulsed, her lifeless form twitching as if strings pulled her limbs. Then a skeletal hand, long and jagged, burst from the fissure, clawing into her torso. Bone cracked. Flesh tore. The sound was wet, grotesque. The hand dragged her body down into the darkness, ripping it apart as easily as paper. David's vision swam. He staggered back, bile rising in his throat. But he couldn't look away. The thing emerged. It was massive, hunched, its frame twisted like some obscene parody of man. Its skin was stretched tight across bone, gray and slick, with patches missing to reveal muscle that writhed like worms. Its face, or what remained of one, was an open cavity, a black maw dripping with viscous saliva. Where eyes should have been were pits, oozing thick black fluid that dripped onto the altar. The townsfolk whispered reverently, the first sound they had made. "He is fed, he is appeased." David stumbled backward, desperate to flee, but his shoe squeaked on the wet stone. Head snapped toward him. Dozens of hollow eyes fixed on him at once. The pastor's lips curled into a smile. "Ah, the stranger." David bolted for the door. He ran through the rain, heart hammering, lungs burning. He didn't stop until he was back at the motel, fumbling the key into the lock with shaking hands. He slammed the door, pressed his back against it, and tried to breathe. It had to be a nightmare. He had fallen asleep at the diner. He'd imagined it, but when he looked down, he realized his jacket was spattered with blood. The next morning, he packed his things and sped out of Grayridge. The storm had passed, the road stretching ahead in golden sunlight. Relief washed over him until he realized the road wasn't ending. He drove for an hour, then two. The forest never broke. Every turn brought him back to Main Street. Grayridge didn't let him leave. Desperate, he stormed into the library. Dust hung thick in the air, shelves sagging with books untouched for decades. He found an old journal, leather-bound, its cover brittle with age. Inside, the words were jagged, frantic. Every 40 years, the bell tolls. A sacrifice must be given. If not, he will take us all. We are bound to him, bound to his hunger. We are his, and no one leaves. The final entry was signed with dozens of names, the same surnames he'd seen on mailboxes and storefronts around town. As he flipped the page, he saw something that made his blood run cold. His own last name was there, Carter, written in faded ink as if someone had known. He would come. That night, the bell tolled again. The townsfolk came for him. They dragged him through the streets, his screams echoing against the silent houses, into the church, down into the crypt, where the altar was slick with fresh blood. He fought, but their grip was iron. They threw him onto the stone. The pastor raised the knife. The last thing David saw was the creature rising from the fissure, its gaping maw stretching wide. Its scream was a chorus of the damned. The knife came down Dot, and Grayridge fed again. The next morning, the town was silent, calm, as if nothing had happened. Curtains fluttered, blinds opened. The sun rose over Grayridge. The population sign still read 348 Dot. It always read 348 Dot because no one ever truly left.
Please like and subscribe channel Fear Frequency for more horror stories. Thank you.